Thank you folks for being here. We are going to go ahead and start our main hall breakout, putting the justice in JEDI. So the acronyms DEI or EDI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, have sparked meaningful conversations in many organizations over the last 2+ years, especially values-driven ones in the B Corp community. I started this, I'm not even on this. I'm gonna hop up. Okay. So, especially values-driven organizations in the B Corp community, but justice is a less common term heard in these discussions. So what exactly is justice? While equity, diversity, and inclusion are important practices for a business to include as part of their day-to-day operations and culture, justice is the act of acknowledging and denouncing oppression, working to remove barriers to opportunity and helping to redistribute power and wealth to BIPOC and LGBTQIA+ business owners. Without the action toward justice, historically marginalized people and businesses, continue to be at an extreme disadvantage. So as a purpose-driven business, how is your company finding balance between building and growing a healthy company that generates profit while also focusing on the inclusive and anti-racist business and culture pillars that matter? In this panel, you're going to hear from fellow B Corps about how they're going beyond DEI to take action and create justice opportunities. And we also believe there's so much more learning and sharing to be done. So we look forward to hearing from you all about how JEDI conversations, work, and action are taking place inside your organization. And with that, I have the privilege of introducing Hazel Valdez, who's the Associate Director for the Oregon Bioscience Incubator. Hazel?
Good afternoon, everyone. First things first, I know you're all shy. If you could all move in, I'd like this to be an intimate conversation. Come on, come on, come on up here. Thank you for doing that and indulging me. Okay, now I'm going to have everybody do something else that's fun. I want you all to get up and act goofy for about 10 seconds while I take this photo, because I want it to be memorable for these folks.
Hey! Oh, looks cool. Oh, thank you.
They didn't know what they were getting when they asked me to be the facilitator.
Okay, sorry.
Before we get started, and because it is a J in JEDI for justice, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land we are all on. B Corp organizations conduct business throughout Portland and beyond, and we're making an effort to acknowledge the history of the area and work towards decolonization of the B Corp industry. Portland rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapu'uya, and many other tribes who've made their homes along the Columbia River. So let's take a brief second to acknowledge that land we are all on. Thank you. My name is Hazel Valdez, and I am the Associate Director for the Oregon Bioscience Incubator. What does that mean? Well, it's working with a lot of scientists who used to be researchers who now decided they wanted to become entrepreneurs. So our offices are in on Southwest Macadam by the river. We have over 32 client companies iterating on a product or a service. A lot of the folks are coming from the universities here in the state, OHSU being the biggest feeder of those researcher groups. But we also have attracted folks from throughout the country, which we're very, very pleased, because we'd like to continue the bioscience ecosystem here in Portland. With that said, I'm going to actually turn it over to our panelists here so they can make their introductions, and let's start with Alexis.
Thank you, Hazel. My name is Alexis Brawley-James, and I'm the founder and chief equity officer at Construct the Present. And at Construct the Present, we do culture, learning development, and leadership activation training.
I'm Anna Madill, the founder and CEO of Avenue. We are a B Corp digital and social media agency for purpose-driven companies here in Portland, proud partner of Construct the Present and Alexis.
I was like, yes, you're a partner.
I'm Alysha Schultz. Can you hear me okay? the Director of Marketing and Culture at Intuitive Digital. We are an organization that works to use digital tools like search engine optimization, paid media assets, web design and development to increase the market share of organizations such as yourselves. The power that we have is to increase your market share and therefore your impact on the communities. And we like to utilize that so that the important work that you're doing has a bigger impact on the world.
There is power in intersections, and of these three panelists, I am part of a cohort that Alexis is hosting through Partners in Diversity with regards to equity and inclusion. And with Anna in my other life, but still seems to exist, I also worked with her through PDX Women in Technology, or PDX WIT. So, and Alysha is the one who asked me to do this panel, so thank you for that.
Thank you, Alysha.
All right, let's get to it. First question. What does justice in this context mean to you or your organization? Let's start with Alexis.
Thank you. So this justice and EDI work is my biggest passion, not only because I'm a Black woman, but also because it's fundamental to all of our existence. And I think justice at its boldest is reparations to the descendants of enslaved Africans, land back initiatives, reproductive health autonomy, and equal voting rights. But if you're not fielding that bold yet, and I say there's the power of yet, because that will happen in my lifetime, I believe it, there's the work of aligning your philanthropic work to your volunteer work to your purpose as a company. I think for Construct the Present, we look at every dollar we make, a percentage of that needs to go to support the average global citizen. The average global citizen makes less than $70,000. So most people don't have a direct use case for my consulting. I'm okay with that. I'm not for everybody. But I must make sure that every decision I make impacts people who look like me. And so that, for me, is the work that we do. And I think I'm excited to hear what you all say, because when we started this process, you would think a digital marketing or marketing company, well, justice, what is that? I don't know how that, and we really worked hard to define thoughtful plans.
Anna?
Yeah, and I think that's actually a perfect segue. I wasn't going to go there, but just to be in response to that is thinking about, so we're a digital and social media agency, and when we started this work, it was taking a step back and a pause to think, well, how does our work really show up, and how is it in alignment with ED&I and justice, JEDI work? And at the very beginning, I will say it was a little bit hard to connect the dots, but taking a step back for myself and thinking about where I've come from, so I identify as an immigrant, adopted, Korean, American, and throughout my childhood, I never thought that I would have been here talking about this subject, let alone running a highly successful digital agency, a B Corp, having impact on our customers, our employees, our community, mostly because I felt small and I felt really like I didn't really always fit in and didn't know what that meant until later in life. I didn't really understand what that meant until I got into more of my professional career and realized, wow, the systems and the institutions in which I am operating in aren't really set up to work for everyone. They weren't really set up to work for me. And in fact, in the advertising industry space, my profession, I sort of grew my professional career in institutions where I was oftentimes the only person who looked like me. I had never seen an Asian CEO or leader in my space, and that was just the norm for me. And so when I think about the work that we do and how justice plays into that, it is going beyond what I think are the invisible things, so the institutions, the systemic inequities, the things that we talk about and we learn about, and that's a lot of the work that we continue to do at Avenue. But the justice piece is being able to speak up and speak out about the things that we see or are learning and the ways in which we are changing the way we operate at Avenue, and hopefully can then either inspire or empower or just bring to light some nugget of knowledge that wasn't there before for other companies and other employees, leaders. So I'll pass it over to you.
Right, as marketing agencies, we put so much messaging out into the world, and that messaging is determined by the people who are in the room creating it, right? And if that is not a good representation of the world that we live in, the marketing that we put out there is not going to be speaking to everyone. It's not going to be thoughtful of those individuals, and it's not going to be meeting the needs of the world at large. And so, we really see JEDI as a whole, and Justice specifically, as the work what we need to do to get people in the room to be making these messages we're sending out in the world to be more equitable, so that the right voices are being heard, the right messages are being out there, and that enables us to do work with partners in the ways that they had not thought of before. When you're building a website and you're sending us all your pictures, are those inclusive? Do you have representation of everyone within them? What is the message that you're sending through these images that you just pulled because they were stock photos, whatever that is? It's also internal, right? We can ensure that we're creating pathways to good paying jobs for individuals who have historically been underserved in the tech industry, creating pay equity solutions so that we're not, paying Joe, who had that 4-year degree and came from that great, MBA school, $10,000 more a year than the kid who managed to teach themselves online the same set of skills and has the same knowledge coming in the door, both in-house and then reaching with our skill set and the value that we can provide to organizations outside of that to extend our reach.
Thank you for that. Let's see, Anna, why did you decide to add the J in the DEI work?
So it did start, I think, with my personal experiences in my professional career, and realizing that the organizations that I was in weren't necessarily set up to have people who look like me or succeed. There's a certain culture and way in which I learned to operate successfully to grow my career, and the justice piece is where I really think the action happens. And so that is taking the learning, and I think we have really entered into this work in partnership with Alexis and Construct the Present with sort of a learner's mindset. We're students here. I also feel like students can be leaders, students can have influence, students can have impact. And so while we're continually learning and growing ourselves and iterating with new learnings, I think that we're able to, with that knowledge, comes great responsibility, or the power and knowledge, and that we can take that and feel like we have responsibility as a company to implement practices within our organization for the betterment of our community, the clients in which we serve, our employees. And one of those projects, which I think we'll probably get into it, but we've had a lot of both fun, but also just it's engaged our entire company in this research project around digital bias. And so this is where how does the advertising digital agency come to play? Like, how does this align with JEDI work? And for us in learning, and this is us being a student and alongside Alexis, is digital bias. We work in a world of algorithms. Alysha, you know this. The Googles, the Facebooks, the platforms out there. And those algorithms disproportionately impact BIPOC and underrepresented, marginalized communities. People don't even know that. And so the small businesses who are trying to grow their own personal success, wealth, business are being impacted by algorithmic bias and other inequities, whether that's having resources to even afford to understand digital marketing by paying an agency, and many other things. And so this research project allowed us to garner a lot of data and information to better understand those inequities. And our knowledge and power is the digital marketing expertise that we hold. And so we wanted to use that data that we pulled from that research project to then put forth free resources to be able to help marginalized communities understand and be able to play within the digital landscape successfully.
How about you, Alysha? Representation matters, so what made you decide to add that J in EDI work?
At my agency, we can't help but get our hands dirty. So for us, it just kind of felt like a natural state of being. But we couldn't I feel like, look away. It felt like I was in these rooms and having these conversations with other businesses in Portland, and kind of these excuses and tropes about being in Portland kept coming up. Like, well, you can't have a diverse workforce if you're sourcing from Portland because Portland isn't diverse. And it felt like all these sort of BS excuses that people were, trotting out to not have to do the work. And it was just like, I'm not buying it, right? Like, and if that's the case, then that is a selling point on why we need to double down on this work right now. If you're telling me you honestly don't think you can source a diverse workforce from Portland, then what I'm hearing is we need to all dig into this work immediately to solve that problem. And I just think that we need to stop telling ourselves these myths that we can't do this thing here, or we can't do it this right way, or we don't have the resources, that if it matters to you, and this work matters immensely to all of us, that you will find the time and you will find the resources and the will to get it done.
Alexis?
Yes! Hey! We're friends, so I don't know why we're all stiff up here, but I think for me, justice has been a part of my journey. I am a first-generation college student. I'm from Aloha, Oregon, and we have another warrior in here. That was our mascot. But my parents were young, and they were not entrepreneurs per se, and they didn't equip me with the life knowledge or tools to really succeed or understand systemic oppression. And I could say every single person in my family has been impacted by the criminal justice system. So I myself almost spent 8 years in prison behind a Measure 11 crime. And it was through the help of a program that was supported by a business that interrupted that path. So when I think of 16-year-old me looking at 35, almost 36-year-old me, this would never have been a reality. Sitting on a panel, being free, I got to pick my clothes today, I got to eat breakfast, I did my makeup. This would be a completely beyond her belief. And I think that we all have to play a role and take responsibility in our community. It's not just the people who are directly touching you, but we need to think beyond. And I think you have to ask yourself, what am I doing to support Black and Indigenous people of color? And if the answer is nothing, then you're losing. You're at a loss. You can't win. Because there are many people who look like me or little Alexis who just needs one person, one adult. And so when I think about equity, diversity, inclusion, it can't be without justice. Otherwise, it's just frosting on the cake. And I don't like frosting on my cake. I like my cake plain.
As a follow-on question to that, I'm going to start with Alysha. Why, to all these folks, why is it important for companies to add that J? Why should they do this?
I mean, aside from it being the right thing to do, I mean, there's always the business case, right, for this work. That if you can't get behind the moral and ethical side of it, right, we do better work when we have more diverse teams. And when we do better work, we can make more money, and isn't that so nice? But really, right, as a group of B Corps, we have committed to being ethical businesses, and this is the cornerstone of that.
Alexis?
I think to your point, B Corps, all B Corps are community organizations, and the sad state that we live in right now is that we have left a lot of the basic needs to nonprofit organizations. We've removed the power and the agency from government and left it to nonprofits who live off the well-meaning feelings of white, wealthy folks. And so how do we address that system? How do we change that? How do we reimagine a community organization? And all of us are a community organization. And so as a business, you have to think about the long term. And we talk a lot about sustainability, but you can't have sustainability without racial justice, without all the people who would be impacted by it. So, and it's good business. We heard from Tillamook, remember? Mm-hmm.
Anna?
When I think about Avenue and as a company, and Avenue is an institution. We may be a smaller institution than some of the larger companies that you might think of who are doing either good or bad things in the world, but we are inherently an institution, and the systems that we have in place to either support our employees, to engage with our community, to empower others, to empower our clients, to even educate our clients. You know, we do digital marketing, social media, but we also have a voice and I think an opportunity to share, you know, what our values and our learnings with those clients who are part of our community, like you were saying, and it's kind of a ripple effect. It is the first and second degree connections and getting the information into the hands of those people. And I think one of the things, actually, just reflecting on this, and Avenue, we are pretty open about where we stand from a values standpoint. We're really proud about the things that we're doing from a JEDI perspective, and we're very, I would say, vocal about that. We actually had a client who had a leadership transition. This was kind of a moment, haven't shared this before, but it was a very interesting sort of moment where they actually left working with Avenue, and it was because of our purpose-driven values. It was cited specifically, and then the work that we were doing, and just the progressive things that we were doing. So that would be some of the JEDI work and those sorts of things. And losing a client is never something that we celebrate, and it took me a little while to feel like this was a celebration. But I think when we have gotten to a point where we are being loud enough and sharing our message to a point where it is pushing people away or turning people off, that we have at least made a step in that J, the justice of taking action and hopefully sharing information with more people. And I think for us that was a win. It was a loss, but I think it was actually a win, and we celebrate that. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually had the same experience where over the last couple of years, as we have been more upfront and communicative with our clients, we call them partners, about work, and push back on things they've sent or asked us to do. We have also experienced this where they're like, whatever you're doing over here doesn't align with our values, and so we're going to have to let you go. And right, that's unfortunate, but it makes space to take on someone new who believes in that work, and we can kind of double down on it together. So it's hard to lose the business. Ideally, we kind of meet them in the middle where they're not fully comfortable in this space, but they trust us enough to hopefully sort of guide them along the journey. So I think that's kind of the sweet spot. We hope to work with other businesses whose values align with our own, but maybe even more so. Alexis calls them pickle jar conversations, right? It takes a couple people get in that jar before you really kind of make an impact and you get it open. And we say that we're going to have pickle jar conversations with our partners, and we hope to kind of nudge them along in the right direction.
Thank you for that. It's very true what you say about people who walk away. It just means you just need to move on. I sit on a board and learned recently that, a grantor decided not to fund us completely because the model of the organization is including underrepresented communities. And not that the board was surprised, it was more the idea that the audacity, what the hell? But I think the lesson there for us as a board then was, okay, then there's other folks out there, let's move on. We're not beholden to one grantor in the state, and we can continue the work more equitably. All right, I'm gonna bring this to the next, we're gonna dig deeper here, folks. All right, let's see. Anna, how do you get your team or leadership on board for these kinds of social justice efforts?
Well, I think I actually had it pretty easy in that regard, mostly from personal experiences, already being invested in wanting to do this work and to lean into this. What I found is, I think with that pickle jar sort of conversation, is you don't really know where everyone's at. Everyone is on their own place in their journey, and you can't expect everyone to be in the same spot. It really wasn't an option, actually. And so, but taking a step back, so what I will say is that it was actually the team who pushed to dive as deep as possible into our JEDI work. And so I give huge props and gratitude to team members. I have one team member in the audience, Natalie, shout out, and team members who have been at Avenue who have said, we really need to do this, and on their own have dug into resources, shared them with the team, started conversations through whether it's Slack or in person. Actually, a lot of this has been in the last couple of years virtually, and started monthly in-person meetings coming together to talk about this. And so one of the things that signals to me is that over time, Avenue has been able to really align on who we are as a company and our values, that we're actually attracting employees to our company who this is important. If we weren't doing this work, this wouldn't be a home for them. This wouldn't be a place for them. And I think that is part of what I think about as the leader of the company, is really wanting to make everything from within the culture, our operations, the way we hire, the way we onboard, the way we retain, the way we work with clients, everything has a JEDI consideration component to it.
How about you, Alysha?
Yeah, we took a look around the room in our organization at the end of kind of 2019, and we're like, this is not working. We had a company full of white cis hetero individuals, and that was not our goal. So, we said, like, look, we clearly need help here, and that's when we engaged Alexis with Construct the Present to do a whole overhaul on our interviewing and hiring practices, which, in a couple years has transformed us into a 56% BIPOC organization.
That was just 3 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're small. We're 17 people. Like. Woo. But we really saw the makeup of our company change, and it was really turning into this incredibly collaborative, supportive place that created opportunities for individuals. And then what we just kind of kept diving in deeper every single year. Like, it was not, the budget has grown. Our time and the commitment we spend as an organization has grown into it. And I'm lucky in that, the CEO of the company is a very humble, sweet man who is very here for the learning and is very open to being held accountable. And I have said things to the CEO that I'm sure would get me fired in other places, and he took that, and it was incredible to watch him own it and make changes, and really supports the efforts that I bring to the table. And I think after our first or second year with Alexis, one of the things we did is we had anonymous surveys and then interviews with them. And the feedback we got from her was like, look, you're doing the DEI parts, like we're kind of missing this J a little bit. And so that's kind of been our efforts in the last couple years, is like, okay, we've got a good baseline system here that we're repeating. Like, how do we grow it? How do we reach out into the community and make what we've learned to be more impactful in the places that we can?
Alexis?
I think, so getting leadership on board, right? I think you have to start with training and awareness and really opening the eyes of folks and expand awareness. Because I think we're still, so at Construct the Present, we're still getting inquiries from companies who haven't started any kind of DEI or culture work. And I don't say that to shock you, though you should be shocked. I say that because everyone in their own time, right? Some of this is traumatic. Racism is traumatic to everyone. It's traumatic to people of color. It's traumatic to white folks. Same with homophobia, transphobia, and sexism. So some people aren't ready. And whatever the reason is, they're not ready, whether it's resources or personal trauma, that's not to judge. But how do you start the conversation? And the conversation has to be one that is trauma-informed and one that centers an opportunity for everyone to be a learner, that we all have places to learn how to be better humans. And I think once folks have that experience, that it's not, that you're not gonna die, that no one's gonna think that I'm a terrible person, then we can start to go a little deeper and talk about the justice piece. But if you can't get to the awareness, if you can't even have the conversation about the oppression that we're all experiencing, we can't go any further than that. And so I oftentimes tell folks who come to me and are saying, like, I don't know how to get leadership on board. Like, they're interested, but they are not ready to commit. I was like, just start with a 3-part series. Let's just do 3 90-minute sessions and see what happens. And the benefit, especially in the pandemic, is we all could use more time to talk to each other. So why don't we talk about something that's important to us and kind of make it less opaque of what's going to happen. Growing up and being a teacher was my first experience. So much of our professional development was steeped in re-traumatizing people of color. Like, I had to bare my soul and share the most intimate, most difficult part of my life for my white colleague to understand racism. That's not the case anymore. We're in the 21st century, and that wasn't helpful, because we would walk in as friends and leave, and she would be thinking, does Alexis think I'm racist? And I would be thinking, is she racist? That's not fun. And not that this is supposed to be fun, but it certainly shouldn't be re-traumatizing. And so I think a lot of us, including myself, worry about, well, what's going to happen? How is this going to be applied? And so the first step for me, and I think it's because I'm a teacher, I'm a little biased, but the first step is always education. And entrust someone who is skilled and has the training to do that for you.
I'll just add on to that really quickly, because just with this conversation, our entry point was, and I think in 2020, was with the awareness piece, the awareness and the education, I think very similar to you. And it felt like a very safe space for the team to actually get vulnerable, connect with one another, and talk about a hard topic, not feeling like they needed to be the expert or be somewhere along sort of the spectrum of all of this learning. And it actually, so for us, and this was sort of this amazing moment that came to me later, is that those were some of the most highly rated meetings with Alexis and her team at Construct the Present, because of the way in which, at the time and in the pandemic, where we were lowering our barriers, we were sort of letting our guard down, we were connecting with one another, we were talking about something hard, and we would leave those conversations with new learning, but also a deeper sense of trust and connection. And little by little, it was that trust and that connection that was built over time, weeks, months, years, that led us to the point where you said, can we take the next step into action? I think very similar. You challenged us, and I think, while we still feel like we are students and learners, we felt like we were ready to take that step because we'd had those conversations.
Yeah. And then you could solve your own problem, right? Because it's not for me to tell you what your lane is. It's for you to define it. Or anyone, we just want to have a wider view, have more perspectives.
Organic learning, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Moving from level 101 to level 102, possibly.
All right. Well, with what you've all said, this is a big one for me too, because I get asked it and I have a hard time putting it into charts. So how do you measure success related to this effort? I'm going to start with you.
Oh, you want to start with me? Okay. Well, though I am an educator and I'm all about emotional intelligence and feelings, and I think feelings are data points, I think you have to have data and metrics. How are you measuring? And one way to measure, which I think we all have heard or are aware of, is the demographics of your staff. But you also need to measure the retention of your staff. You need to measure the engagement of your staff and community. But I also think accountability is important. And so when we measure success, how are your relationships? And in relationships, all positive relationships, if you think about your most important relationship, at some point you had to have a hard conversation. And you had to hold that person accountable, or someone had to hold you accountable. That is what we're trying to get to. And so when you think about the people, whether it's your partners, your employees, the community that you serve, can you have a hard conversation with them? Could you go to them and say, I need you to do better? And could they come to you? And if the answer is maybe or no, you have more work to do.
Alysha?
Yeah, I love that. I think we make an effort to serve our staff because we're digital marketers, so we're a bunch of data nerds, so we collect data on it. Right? And then we can measure that over time, right? As the makeup of our staff has changed over time, did the psychological safety of our staff also maintain? Did it grow? Did it decrease, right? As we're talking to staff members, do they feel like they have a mentor in the company across the board? Do they feel like they have leadership that they can connect with? These are the pieces that we're seeing that as the inclusion in our company has grown, are these pieces maintaining or changing, right? What is retention like? I had gotten, it was an email, I think it was early in 2020, and I think this girl just needed to let off some steam, and she's like, you need to do a better job of retaining BIPOC individuals, and it was like, we are absolutely working on that. Like, if I would love to hear whatever you have to say about how we could do that better. All of the pieces matter. What are your development programs like? Do you have clear paths to leadership within your company or to career growth outside of your company for all of your individuals, and are you actively working on those?
Anna?
So we have a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. We have two of them actually, but the one that's relevant to this is to empower every woman and BIPOC-owned business in the state of Oregon. One of the ways in which we're doing that is the Mercatus program through Prosper Portland. So I've been a consultant there providing digital marketing expertise for 3+ years, And there's a grant that is also given out to support those business owners' digital marketing efforts. This year, so in terms of measurement and data, we're actually taking that grant program under our umbrella at Avenue. We're going to be help facilitating giving out 60 grants at $3,000, so that's $180,000 in the hands of Mercatus businesses, and facilitating, along with 4 other digital marketing consultants, getting expertise to these business owners, as well as some funds to help support their digital marketing. So we're measuring that. In the past 3 years, we've averaged about 15 of those businesses per year in terms of serving them. It's not a huge number, but it's data, and so we want to improve that. We want to improve the impact that we're having. That's one of the ways. We certainly have lots of metrics that we track. I think that diversity is one of them. And the other piece is the digital marketing and digital bias research project that I had mentioned. And that was around the resources created, the data we collected. But then from there, it's how many people are viewing that content? Are we actually getting it to the right people? And if not, do we need to promote it? Do we need to reach out into certain communities to make sure that content is being utilized and found by the people who need it most? So those are all metrics that we can track through analytics and other platforms.
It's certainly better than the Insta algorithm right now.
Just saying.
You feel some type of way, huh?
Okay, so this is a really good one. Is there a right way or a wrong way to do justice work? I'm going to start with you, Alysha.
I think maybe the wrong way is if you haven't started learning first, if you are maybe earlier on the journey path, you don't dive into the justice work first. You're in a learning and an education space. And then, I think, especially I'll speak for my white, hetero, cis individuals, it is our job to help dismantle racism and ableism and sexism. Like, it absolutely is. We may not, in fact, have the answers because we are not the community as largely affected by it. So it is extremely important to listen to those people who are affected by that and then find what your value is. What is the resource and knowledge and information that you can offer to these communities to help them achieve what it is that we need to do, which is dismantling all the systemic barriers to success for all these communities. So start by learning, start by listening, and then find what it is that you specifically have to offer and find the community that needs that. And then start showing up and keep showing up.
Thank you for that. Anna?
Yeah, I resonate with that a lot. That's awesome. I think in terms of the justice piece, it's similar to that. It's about, you can't really, for us anyway, we couldn't jump into it without first listening and learning. So I think about the Digital Bias Project. There would have been no way for Avenue to have created resources that would have been relevant or directed to the people who, about the problems and challenges that they were facing if we hadn't asked the question, put the survey out into the community, gathered the data to understand those pain points, and then begun to figure out the best way to create those resources. So for us, it's the listening and the learning and the engagement has to happen first before you're jumping into action.
A right way or wrong way to do justice work? Well, I think you're doing it wrong if you aren't including Black, Indigenous, trans, disabled folks. So if you are attending panels and there's no one who's Black, trans, or Indigenous on that panel, you're doing it wrong. I have so much to say. I think, let me try to
Say it.
I think also, I think you're doing it wrong if you stop. I think we all have to take breaks. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think it can be tempting to think that we'll solve these big, gigantic issues in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, in 4 years. And I think that you have to commit to the lifetime of the work. And when you commit to the lifetime of the work, you know that it's going to be hard, but you have to also center joy. It should be fun. Growing up as a Black woman, I talked about these issues all the time, and it wasn't always this big, heavy, sit-down, serious dinner. It was enjoyable. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't enjoyable, and I certainly wouldn't have started a company to do this if it wasn't enjoyable. And so I think we have to remember that we are connected to each other at all times. Like, build connectivity, that's what we're here. And so you're doing it wrong if you're doing it only to center the trauma or to feel bad, or if you want to feel guilty or atone, that's doing it wrong. I think doing it right is doing it in a way that is healing, that is connecting, that's joyful, and that is in community. So you shouldn't be doing it alone. Like, look around at all the people who are here, who came to this session, who are B Corps. In your community, there's people who want to have this conversation, but you can't only have it if someone who looks like me is in the room. So to Alysha's point, like, white folks, you need to be talking about it when there's no one of color in the room. You need to be challenging and saying, we're doing this, and we don't have anybody in here without people of color. We need, who's missing? Who's missing from the conversation? Who doesn't have a seat at the table? How do we build that chair for them and then welcome them?
I'm going to snap on that one. And I will say, I myself, I'm asked to sit on panels or facilitate things. And before I actually commit, I ask that organization to send me the topic and who the other speakers are for that day. And if I don't see one person that looks like me or is Black, Indigenous, just a person of color, I politely decline. It's not great for my personal brand, but it is great for my personal brand because I'm actually living that value. There is no shame in walking away from things like that. So just keep that in mind when you're going to create an event. Keep everybody in mind. It's good for everybody. Here's a really good one. Is calling it JEDI
I didn't think you were
problematic?
going to get to this one.
Yeah, they're going to answer this one. Alexis, you go first.
I think it is. Plot twist. So I know B Corp has gotten behind JEDI, and putting the justice is really important. I think the issue that is, for me, that's problematic is the connection to the Star Wars franchise. And, you know, I love the Star Wars movies. They're great entertainment. But they have a long history of exploiting women and people of color in caricatures and stereotypes. And so how could we then do work that is centered on justice that continuously reminds us of injustice? And so I think we definitely need to keep the J. If we have to have an acronym, which I feel like as adults, our brain can only hold so much. One that I'm starting a trend today is EDGE. EIDJ, and that actually came out of Foley, so I'm not going to take credit for that. Their E-team named it EDGE. So I think it is problematic, but I also think that I don't want to spend time talking about what we call it. I want to do the work. So if it makes it easy for you to say JEDI, do that. I'm cool with it. No beef here.
Anna?
Yeah, so this has been part of my continual just education and journey, and not until recently knowing that connection. So I agree 100% with Alexis. On the flip side, I will just say that we throw so many acronyms around, not only in our industry, so digital marketing, SEO, PPC, CV, like so many acronyms. You know, everyone has probably heard EDI or DEI at some point, and then JEDI. And so when I think about the movement of JEDI work, and even the B Corp movement, any movement that is trying to grow because we are doing purpose-driven work, and I think of JEDI being something that people hear and they will probably, if connect it to something, or it's a word that they can remember, and knowing that the more times you change something, or change your brand or your name, the harder it is for people to remember who you are, what you do. So in that sense, it's like I'm conflicted because I agree 100%, but I also, in the spirit of wanting to build and grow the understanding and the movement, feel like it is something that people can remember when they hear it.
Alysha?
Yeah, I agree with both sides of the coin, right? Disney has a historically problematic record of giving money to, non-inclusive politicians. The JEDI story itself is a little bit of a white saviorism story, right? So, not great. But right, like if calling it JEDI is what enables you to remember it, and you are going to then go out and start making efforts in that, then I think maybe the payoff is a little bit worth the loss here. It's really can go either way.
I will say our company is partially operated, funded by the state, and I had to present to one of our legislators the equity and inclusion initiatives, and we use JEDI. And this is a person that's running for governor. Let's just go with that. And she said, Ms. Valdez, yes, why are you using JEDI? That's Star Wars. Help me. Let's educate our own legislators on what actually that means. You know, at the end of it, she sent me a private note and apologized. But again, if it sticks, our team is using JEDI. Our executive director is very much into justice and pretty proud of how they've come along since I started that with the organization a year and a half ago. So it's just, I am conflicted too, but I also love Star Wars, so there's that. I got issues.
I think it's like BIPOC, right? Where you have to find the word that works for you and just be clear on why you're using it. So when someone asks you or says, aren't Star Wars racist? You can say, yes, I've had this deep, long conversation. I attended a panel, and here's why I'm using that. It's all about context, right?
All right. Well, let's round it out with this question, because I think this is important for everyone here to at least know what that is. And outside of you lovely, beautiful people, what other resources can this community tap into with regarding justice work? Alexis.
Let me start. I would say identify a nonprofit that you want to partner with who is led by the community that the nonprofit serves, like Pecun, Reina Lopez, and commit your dollars and your volunteer time off to funnel that into that community. I think too often we do $100 here, $3,000 here, and nonprofits cannot exist on that funding model. They need sustainable, predictable time and resources. And so how can your company create an authentic relationship with that organization that goes on year after year? And don't switch every year if possible. That's the feedback I've been getting. They're like, add this part too. So,
Anna?
that's what I would say.
From a resources standpoint, our team has actually done a lot of work, and a lot of it has come out of work with Alexis and Construct the Present to compile. We have basically a blog post or a page on our site for resources around anti-racism, JEDI work, digital bias, you name it. And so we've compiled that. So that is something that I personally reference quite a bit. And then in terms of just the work overall, where you may choose to engage, for us it was just looking sort of deeply at our core values, our mission and vision and purpose for the company, and then aligning with the work we did. So, I wouldn't have thought like, wow, digital bias, this is something we can actually take action on as a marketing agency. But when we really thought deeply about it, and through the work with Alexis and Construct the Present, we were able to find a way in which we could authentically utilize our expertise and engage in a way that was beneficial for the communities that we serve.
Alysha?
Yeah, I think definitely doing what Alexis mentioned is excellent. We actually started work with Urban League of Portland this year to do just this. And right, you're not alone. You don't have to invent the wheel. A lot of times, I think that there are opportunities to basically lend support. We saw what Anna and Alexis were doing with digital resources for BIPOC businesses, and we were like, well, how can we help? And it was like, okay, this is a specialty that we do, like we'll contribute content to this effort. We run a scholarship to help kids in college who are BIPOC LGBTQ+, who are studying marketing and tech. And we give them money, right? And we are small, so we don't have a ton of money, but we've been finding other organizations in the Portland community and the B Corp community to help that effort, right? We have more power together, and we have more impact when we do it collectively, and it's also, can be less of a drain on what is are already very full plates, right? So look for others and partners in this space that are already doing work and finding places where you can amplify, because it grows that impact, right? And then it also lessens your workload in terms of trying to get that uplift and get it going. And there's also a ton of different organizations within the Portland community. We're a part of Tech Town. They're going through a bit of a change at the moment, but that's been a really incredible resource, both for education. They have a CEO cohort, so keeping leadership accountable, and then finding others in the community who you can partner on this work with.
All right, final question. parting word, actionable item for the group here listening? I'm going to start with Anna.
I think it would be to just take one step. If you're already doing this work, just huge kudos and applause for you. And if you're not, that's okay too. There was a point in time where we hadn't started this work either. And I think it's just taking that one step of, whether it's going to a website, maybe it's Construct the Present, I wasn't paid for that, but just read, do a little bit of learning, if that's just the one step. Talk to folks inside your organization, talk to leadership, advocate for the time and the resources. There are case studies. This stuff is important, it works, and it can really engage and bring together a company. And when engagement happens within a company, it actually results in business outcomes. And so we've actually also found that when we do this work, not only is it something that is critical and imperative, but it leads to business outcomes for Avenue.
Alysha.
Yeah, if you're not clear on what your organization is doing in this space today, ask your manager about it on, I guess today's Thursday, tomorrow, Monday, whenever you talk to them next, right? This should be an integral part of everything that you're doing at work, and if you are not clear on what that is, they're not clear on what they're doing. And they need that pressure from team members to know that this is important work, this is things they want to see in the workplace, and this is absolutely water they should be wading into, and start putting pressure on your leadership to really start digging into it.
Alexis.
I would just amplify what both Anna and Alysha said is, one, if you are in a position of power and you are doing this work, ask how in 2023 are we going to go deeper? How are we going to expand our work? If you're someone who is doesn't know what you're doing, ask the people around you. Collect stories, because I bet consumers, customers, community members are asking you as well. So use that as leverage to funnel and make that change. And then I think on a personal level, commit to, if you just read or subscribe to a podcast or follow someone on social media, one thing that is different than your identity. So add one diverse perspective. We're adults, we're not all gonna go make a bunch of new friends, but what you can do is you can read a book, you can listen to a podcast, you can watch a TV show.
Thank you all so much. Please give them all a big round of applause.
Are we doing Q&A?
Wes, do we have time for Q&A? Yeah, you want to say 5? Sure. Taking questions from the audience. Don't be shy, folks.
That's
Okay.
Just
All
wanted
right.
to give you an opportunity
Yep.
in case
So
you had
we're-
any burning
yeah.
questions.
Is that a question, Wes?
Wes?
Alexis mentioned collecting stories. Is there just a story that's on your mind that you want to highlight? This press got a lot.
A story for me? I was like, I collect stories. Yeah, I think for me, today. So today, I have done enough panels and then looked at them in retrospect that I was like, you know what, I think I'm gonna get my makeup done. So I reached out to the woman who does my hair, and she connected me, and so I'm getting my makeup done this morning, and the woman is talking to me. She's a Black woman, and she's telling me how she has a full-time job, she's getting her real estate license, and she does makeup on the side. And her eventual goal, she's also a mother who has two children, and one is a sophomore in high school, one is 21. And her eventual goal is to full-time be a makeup artist. And listening to her story and hearing all that she's carrying, her story's not unique. And I think that if more people who have historically been left out of those decision makings and having autonomy over their day and their life, what would the world be like? If we all got to choose, because many of us during the pandemic, and I don't mean many of us in this room, but many got to sit in our homes on a computer and attend Zoom. And a majority of us were on the front lines delivering food, doing groceries. And yet we're coming out of the pandemic and we haven't solved for any of the things that existed or were amplified. And I thought about her because I was like, oh, I need to connect her to Anna because her Instagram is amazing, but it's not reaching anybody. So if she could get just a consistent book of clients, she could leave her full-time job and she could devote it to her passion of doing makeup, which clearly she's really good at.
Question.
First, thank you. Growing up, I never attended a panel that looked like you guys, so it's just great to see change in real life. You mentioned how this work, like challenging and difficult, it should be joyful. Could you share maybe ways, practical ways that you have made it joyful for you and your team? My personal experience, I've been re-traumatized. I've had staff tell me that it's not very productive. They shy away from it because it's so traumatic. So any advice you can give us that we can take with us to bring joy to this work?
Yeah, I think, for us, because we do trainings and education with Alexis, but we also do them without her. And what we've tried to do is, we always try to create what we call as a courageous space, right? Like, we are going to have hard conversations here. We're going to talk about things that are uncomfortable, and we're going to have to acknowledge some really horrific truths about the history of this country and maybe our descendants, right? That being said, like, it is required to be in the room. It is not required to share, right? You choose when you decide that you feel comfortable to share your story, to share your truth, to provide a comment. So that, no one's being forced to sort of open themselves up when that's not a place that they feel comfortable and safe. I think for me, really, the joy that I've seen is the way that it has positively impacted team members. We had a team member earlier this year who was able to have some gender transition surgery because they felt that they were at a workplace that was comfortable enough that would support them through that effort, that they had not historically been able to do at previous jobs. And the impact it had made for them in their lives was just so incredible. And like, for me, that's where the joy is seeing other people be able to really step into their full selves and bring that to the workplace, and then see all of our team completely support them.
Yeah, I'll add on to that and say that for us, the joy has really come through the connectivity. So it's actually just the theme of the conference today. And in the sessions that we do, both with Alexis and actually mostly with Alexis, have been openers, so questions that allow us to, before we dive into the work, we are talking about each other and sharing something. It could be vulnerable and personal, but it actually opens up the entire team to being more connected to each other. And so that when we start doing this work, we feel more connected, we feel really aligned, and like we know the person who we're sitting next to or looking at it from across the screen. And it makes the work really fun because we have that personal connection.
I think the joy comes from centering the communities of color or the most marginalized, of having the conversations as if that person is at the center in that experience, versus oftentimes these conversations end up in a white dominant heterosexual cisgendered mode that requires we expose all the problems for other people to learn. And I think it's important to create affinity space, and we've talked about this a lot in the B Corp world, because many B Corps are small, where you might not have enough employees just in general to have an affinity space. But I think that's another opportunity for us to connect and be better together and create B Corp affinity spaces where we can have these conversations, both in cross diversity conversations, but also with people who look like each other, and really heal our own issues, because it has to be a healing conversation. And that's where the joy is for me, because at the end of the day, if I'm able to be a better person, what is more joyful? If I'm better to connect more people, to joke, that's what gets me excited in the morning.
And with that, folks, the session is over. Please give them all a round of applause.
Good job.